welcome everyone who is attending live through Zoom. If you're on Zoom right now, you can send questions in either using the Q&A function or just go into the chat box. I'm Eliza Sherman. I am the CEO of Ellementa. Every month we do a book club. We feature an author of a wellness book, either related to cannabis and CBD or not. But in this case, yes. we're speaking with Laurie Wolf today. She's the author of several different cookbooks, including Edibles for Beginners. This is the topic of conversation for the book club today. We'll spend the next hour with Laurie chatting away, and we'll answer your questions. I'm a super beginner, so we'll be answering a lot of my questions too, which are probably your questions if you've never made your own edibles. Before that, I want to show you my t-shirt. This is so funny. Side effects may include the giggles, which is perfect for a talk about edibles. But also, this happens to be some friends of ours, Highland Pantry, who just came out with their little edible mints, mini, midi, and more. 3 different levels with a really nice ratio of CBD to THC. Only available right now in California, only available for delivery in Los Angeles area and Marin County. So if you're in those areas, check out Highland Pantry. I also wanted to mention still water. This is my little cup. Dive into life, relax into life. They have isolate powders, THC, and now CBD. And the CBD one is now called Caliper CBD. So look up, Google Caliper CBD. And these are these little packet powders of isolated CBD, which you can just put into your coffee, your tea, your water, possibly even cook with. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute, but let's get on to the conversation. Hi, Laurie.
Hello, nice to be here.
Nice to see you. So I have to say, a beginner's book on edibles is perfect for me because, as I mentioned, while I have learned a whole lot over the last 3 years about cannabis, I am not the best cook in the world. I barely know my way around a kitchen, but also I'm gluten-free. So that always precludes
throws
me
a wrinkle, yeah.
Yeah, it throws a little wrench in the works. Before we go into your book, and we'll talk about what's in the book, and we'll talk about some of the recipes specifically, can you tell us how you got started with all of this, the cooking? Because this is not your first cookbook. This is not your first rodeo.
It's not. It's not. I have been a cannabis user since I was 15. Back like 60s and 70s, I smoked a lot of pot. And I continued to smoke like through college, and then got married, had a couple of kids, and decided to like clean up my act for a little while and be the super responsible parent. And I think my kids, they're 7 years apart. My son was like 15, and I was like, I'm going to give this a try because I was feeling kind of stressed and I didn't want to go the route of medication. And I went to a friend's house. I hadn't smoked in years, and your t-shirt is perfect. We just laughed and for 2 hours about nothing, about everything. And so I sort of started incorporating cannabis back into my life. And then my father got quite ill, and he got cancer. And for the last few months of his life, I started just doing very simple cooking for him. Just things that it wasn't so much the pain as he was really down. He felt kind of hopeless, and his situation was hopeless. But when he went on the very strong medications, he couldn't communicate at all. And when I would infuse his food with cannabis, he was able to, during the day, not use strong medications. So he was lucid. And I think it was important for the whole family to have him. He was more present because he wasn't doped up.
Right.
And he wasn't eating, brownies and Rice Krispie treats. What I started to do was make soup for him. And
Oh,
yeah, because that's
yeah.
really all that he could, you know, take in. So making soup, I realized, so I had been making some canna butter from, I think, like a recipe book from the 60s, some crazy book about, cooking with
Some hippie
cannabis.
book, some hippie book.
Exactly. It's the flowers and Volkswagen Beetles all over the cover. And I read how to make canna butter, and I had made it years ago, for the brownie. And so what I did was I didn't know the potency. I knew how strong the cannabis was that I smoked. So I could kind of gauge how strong it would be. And I always started with the tiniest bit because I didn't want to freak him out. And what I learned then was that as long as there's something you can saute in your soup, you can make an infused soup. And you can make a chunky
Oh,
soup or a blender soup. But
wow.
the simplest thing you can do is put a teaspoon or two of butter or oil, saute your vegetables, add your stock, and puree it in a blender. And it was such an easy way for us to give him relief from stress and discomfort. And so that was the very beginning of my starting to make edibles. And at that time, I lived in New York, and my husband and I decided to move, dragging our daughter, who was going into 8th grade, to Portland. She was freaked out. All her friends at school were like, there isn't even electricity in Oregon. Like
They
it
have
was
outhouses.
exactly
It's sort of
Lewis
like in
and
Alaska,
Clark.
right? In
Yeah,
Alaska,
yeah.
they're like, everyone's in dog sleds and igloos.
Yeah, it was like that. But we moved. It was great, and I had for years a seizure disorder. When I moved and I was on very strong medication that had a lot of side effects that called for liver tests every 3 months. It was medication that could potentially be very harmful. The side effects worse than the actual thing it's treating. I was at a dinner party. We moved to Portland. I was at a dinner party, and I was sitting next to a guy who had the exact same kind of seizure disorder that I had. And that was an absence kind of epilepsy. I didn't have like the terrible attack where I'm lying on the floor foaming at the mouth. It wasn't like that. I would just be gone. I would be talking, and then I would feel like heat, a little nauseous, and then I had no idea where I was. And it was terrifying. The first couple of times it happened when I didn't know what it was, one time I was in Barney's, this fancy store in New York, in the Thai department, and it happened, and I just stood there. I had no idea what to do, and it just happened that a friend of mine was there and helped me, put me in a taxi, took me home, and I went through tests and found out that I had this seizure disorder. So I was on medicine, moved to Portland, sat next to a guy who had the same thing. I had never met anybody who had it. And he said he didn't take medicine anymore. He just used cannabis.
Wow.
And I was dubious, it just didn't seem, and I didn't even know that Oregon had legal medical marijuana. I said I would have moved here long ago if I had known that. So I met a cannabis doctor at a Volvo station, and he's like, oh, you're on that medicine, I'm gonna fix you up with a doctor, you try cannabis, I promise you in 3 weeks your seizures will be gone. And it was true. I talked with my doctor, and she and I worked together to slowly get off my medication while I was starting to find the right dose of cannabis to deal with my seizures. And it took about 5 weeks to be off the medicine, the prescription medicine, and to find that I was managing my seizures.
Wow.
And it's been years now. It's been like 5 years. And the only time I got a feeling that I was going to have a seizure was when I had pneumonia. And the first time I had pneumonia, it was fine. And I just took a little bit of cannabis in the morning. I could take it in any form. but I got pneumonia again. I was really sick. I didn't
Mm.
want to eat or drink. And I started to get an aura like 5 days in.
Wow.
So it did two things. One, it cemented that it in fact was managing my epilepsy.
The cannabis was
Yeah,
working.
it was working. And
Yep.
so I have been just using cannabis. I can use cannabis and CBD, or just CBD and just cannabis. And I need just a small amount.
Mm.
Sometimes I feel like I should do it again later in the day, but typically in the morning I'll do a little bit. I won't get high unless I want to. And
Yes, because there's nothing wrong with that. I
there's
always say,
nothing wrong with
right, we talk about health and wellness, but being high, being super relaxed, giggling,
yeah,
laughing, laughter is
yeah,
the best medicine.
yeah,
That's good
yeah.
stuff.
Yes, I personally don't think people should drive when they're high. I say my driving is challenging enough. I don't need to add cannabis. But if I'm on vacation, I'm not a drinker. I'll go for a joint or an edible, even during the day. It's great. I love it. Makes me feel good. Also, I suffer from pretty serious depression.
Mm.
And sometimes I can be like, well, it used to be, and now the cannabis is working. I used to go into very dark periods where I just couldn't function. I didn't want to get out of bed. And using cannabis, again, it's not gone, my depression, but it's managed.
Manageable.
So like on the darkest day, if I smoke a little, I'll be able to kind of be myself and joke
It
around.
lifts you,
Yes,
lifts your mood.
yes, like completely out of the darkest, and really the darkest. My depression is quite severe.
Yeah.
So it's
Wow.
been like those two things. It's changed my life.
So here's what I find fascinating too, and I think this is a truth that I have observed myself over the years. Women tend to create based on the things that they have personally been seeking. So, for example, starting Ellementa for me was I was looking for a group where I could talk about, learn about cannabis, where I felt safe, where
Yeah,
there were other women who could share their stories. And so there wasn't that forum. So I created that. You have all of these pieces in your life where cannabis could be healing. So what do? You write
yeah,
books.
yeah.
Before we dive into this book, which we definitely want to do, there are people here who I'm sure are just so interested in learning about edibles and how to make your own. Tell me really quickly some of your previous books, because this is not your first book.
Yes. The first book I did was called Herb, and I think that was the first kind of coffee table, beautiful cannabis book. And
Mm.
I did that with a chef in Colorado. We worked together, and it was a great experience, and it's a beautiful book. I did the medical marijuana dispensary book, and that was focusing on people who are managing like illness of any kind with cannabis. I did a book, another book of recipes. Of course, I'm blanking on the name of it now. All the books have focused on helping people learn how to cook with edibles, one, without overdoing it. Where we say start low, go high. It's never pleasant. It's not horrible, and it's not dangerous unless you're doing something stupid like driving stoned. If you get too high, it's manageable, but don't. Figure out what your comfortable dose is by starting with the tiniest bit of it's THC, I should say, is the part of the plant that gets you high. So it's THC that you kind of need to take into consideration. A lot of CBD isn't going to do anything to screw with your head, but a lot of THC, if you're not used to it, is quite uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Physically, in your head, it's not pleasant. So we always say what doctors say. If you have a doctor who is willing to work with you in cannabis, 2.5 milligrams to 5 milligrams of THC is a good place to start.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
yeah, you know, and even occasionally there will be a person who's extremely sensitive and will feel that 2.5 milligrams. I have yet to come across someone who felt that was uncomfortable.
Right. And
You
I was
know,
going to say 2.5 is about my comfort zone, and
yeah,
5 is my go to sleep zone.
okay,
Get a
yeah,
good night's rest zone. So I'm still super lightweight. I've tended to go more towards just CBD, of a full spectrum CBD. I'm looking at your website, marijuana edibles and cooking with cannabis. So herb, cooking with cannabis, marijuana edibles, medical marijuana dispensary, and edibles for beginners. So let's dive into the book now. I want to make
sure.
sure we get through some of the pieces of this book. So it starts off great for the very beginner with a Cannabis 101. I love books that don't take for granted that everyone knows everything.
Yeah.
And you know, we break it down: sativa indica hybrids. We talk a little bit about cannabinoids and terpenes.
Can
Of
I
course,
say something about indica and sativa?
yes, of
Yeah.
course.
So
Please do.
for people who go into dispensaries, cannabis has been classified as a sativa or an indica, and then something in the middle that's a hybrid. Sativas are more cerebral, have been considered to be more cerebral, and indicas more body high. Like people say indica couch for indica.
Right. Thinking into couch.
Thinking indica. That is, there really is no longer anything that's a sativa or an indica. Everything has been crossbred. Names are changed. You can really put any name on anything you grow. You can call it what you want, or you can call it the name of a strain that's been around. But without knowing the information about the plant, know what it's made of, what the terpenes are, you really, from the name sativa and indica, you have no clue what you're going to get. So we're just trying, in Laurie and Mary Jane and my company, to let people know that there's more to it than just saying, I want a sativa. And if you're dealing with either the person you're getting your cannabis from, if you're not in a legal state, or if you are and you're dealing with a bud tender, you really want someone who knows what's going on, knows that they're, you know, if you say, I just want a sativa, and they give it to you, there's more information that you need to have. And in all dispensaries, everything has to be tested now. So you will know what your cannabis potency is. Not everybody is testing currently for terpenes. It's a lot more expensive.
Right.
But I see it more and more in dispensaries. And I hear when I'm in dispensaries, people asking the right questions. You know, what is right? I can't sleep. So you will hear from a bud tender, get a strain that has a lot of myrcene, because myrcene is a terpene that will help you relax and help you sleep.
Sedating.
So, yes. So there are questions that you should ask when you go into a dispensary to know that you have the full story and you're getting everything you want out of the plant, because there's much more than just the getting high. The getting high is wonderful and fun, but there are a lot of, look, it's managing my epilepsy and my depression. So ask questions. If you're a person who gets a little paranoid, tell the bud tender, or the budista, as they call them in some.
I haven't heard that one yet.
Yeah.
So this is a really good point, because that's one of the things we try to do at Ellementa, is educate everybody about cannabinoids and terpenes. Not the only chemical compounds in cannabis, but two of the prevalent ones. And that's what you have a little breakdown about cannabinoids and terpenes.
Yes.
So the cannabinoids like THC, CBD, but also THCA, THCV, CBDA, acid forms, variants of. There's also CBN. When you talk about paranoia, you want to make sure that it's pretty low on CBN.
Yeah. And you know, there are people who want CBN,
Exactly. Yeah.
which
Because
is so interesting.
because it is sedating, but if you
Yeah.
don't know how much you should be taking, it can cause the paranoia.
Yeah.
And myrcene, something I've learned, I don't know if you know this, but myrcene is not good for menopausal women.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
So linalool is something else to
Yeah.
look for, right? Which is like, which is also in lavender, which has
Yeah.
a relaxing bed. So you just need to try and, like you say, ask for test results
Yeah.
and look for the particular cannabinoids or terpenes that might help you feel what you want to feel.
Right.
But you do mention in your book, which I think is really important, there is a difference between eating cannabis,
Yes.
and smoking it. And the eating it goes through your digestive system, through your liver,
Right.
and comes out differently, more potently, but also
Longer lasting.
longer lasting. Exactly. So we have to really be careful.
Yeah.
Just because you smoke this much doesn't mean you would eat that exact same amount, because it will
Yes.
transform.
And it creeps up on you. When you smoke, within a few minutes, you know, you're high or you're not. When you eat an edible, it's, you don't know exactly what your reaction is going to be. And so you want to take precautions. You don't want to eat an edible and go out, if you're going to be driving, because, it can take literally up to 3 hours for some people for an edible to work. That's not typical.
Right.
But for some people, if they've just eaten, or just your own metabolism takes longer.
Exactly.
So be aware. Don't make the mistake. We call it the Maureen Dowd incident. She's a writer for the Times. She went to Colorado, was told how much chocolate to eat. She ate the whole chocolate bar and had the most dreadful experience. And she wrote about it and said, this edible thing, it's awful. She later apologized, because if she had eaten just that little bit that the bud tender told her to eat, it probably would have been fine.
It was user error. It was user error.
Exactly. So what we say is, you take a week. If you buy an edible, start with 2.5 milligrams and don't eat any more that day. The next day, if you didn't feel anything, go to 5, then go to 7. It's worth it. And by a week, you will know your dose. And then, you can go into dispensaries, or when you make your own, if you can kind of gauge potency, you can not have the, oh God, I can't believe I ate the whole thing.
Whoa, feeling.
Yeah.
So in your book, you have a little section before you get into the recipes where you're breaking down some of the different strains.
Yeah.
Or we've been calling them now cultivars, even though that's not in the vernacular right now. People still call them strains, but
cultivar will be, I
a little.
think that.
Do you think it's going to come in? Okay.
I do. Actually, we have a CBD kitchen and a THC kitchen.
Oh, wow.
And the CBD kitchen, we work with a craft cannabis company called East Fork Cultivars. Okay. And they are all about breeding, and their cannabis, their CBD is phenomenal. And so they are extremely knowledgeable and have been super helpful to us. Knowing, like, working with them and their CBD strains, we're learning more. And cultivars is, I believe, like the correct term.
The correct term.
Yes.
That's what we've been told as well. So we try to perpetuate that. So what I love about this is, I recognize some of these names like Blue Dream.
Yeah.
You will talk about the flavor profile, which I think is really important. And this goes back to terpenes that give flavor, color, and smell to plants, including cannabis. So it's a sweet, herbal, floral, fruity strain with tangs of blueberry, mango, and vanilla. And the dominant terpenes are myrcene, pinene, caryophyllene, and terpenoline.
Terpenoline, yeah. You don't hear that one that much, but
there are
many
so
more
many
terpenes. Exactly. We sort of talked about the most prominent, but there are hundreds.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I like how you then mention you infuse tropical desserts, especially
Yeah.
mangoes, with Blue Dream. Just in that paragraph alone, you have demystified and pinpointed terpenes, the various flavors and flavor profiles, and then in a sense a pairing, if you will,
Yes.
and what you would put them into. Not that you couldn't put that in something else, but
Right.
knowing that it has those dominant flavors, I think
Exactly.
it's fantastic. I love that. Let's see. What is
I will
what?
say,
Yeah,
let me,
yeah,
linalool, which is
yeah.
a very floral, citrusy
Hmm.
terpene. Whenever I make a lot of lemony desserts, lemon curd, lemon trifles. And when I can use linalool, I do. A strain with, mostly
With
linalool.
dominant liminal. Yeah.
It doesn't even mean necessarily that you're going to taste the cannabis, but I feel like it enhances the
Mhm.
experience. And what the linalool has in it will be some of the same things that lemons have in it, same terpenes, because vegetables, flowers have terpenes.
Right.
So we like
Yes.
to, when we can, pair things. And sometimes, like with myrcene, which is musky, we will use a high myrcene strain or cultivar, and we will do mushrooms, something woody and
Ooh.
earthy. And so stuffed mushrooms just seem to be right. So even though you're not necessarily going to taste it, we kind of like the idea of combining them to kind of be it as be the best it can be best, except we have to forget who says be best.
All right. Well, but I like that thinking. I mean, there's something about that, and so that's why that the whole section where you break it down is really interesting. Gorilla glue,
Yeah.
earthy, pungent, grassy, and sour. Extremely resinous. It gives your mouth a sticky feel. Not always an easy strain to pair with a lot of dishes, but we like to use it in dishes with dill, such as chicken noodle soup, egg salad, and potato salad.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is so interesting. I love this. So one of the next steps is, so you're picking your flower, you're looking out for what cannabinoids and terpenes are in it. Then you have to process it. So you
Yeah.
have flour, but you got to take some steps. If you want to activate the THC, you have to decarboxylate it. You have to heat it. It needs to be
Exactly.
heated.
Right.
But, and that's also to activate the CBD,
Yeah.
because the raw plant has CBDA,
Hmm.
THCA, acid forms, which are non-intoxicating, but also quite beneficial as well.
Yeah.
Let's start with raw and then move to how do we heat it to get it ready for cooking and baking. So let's talk to us about raw. Like, what can we do to preserve the acid forms, and what could we make with that, and how could we use it?
So you're talking about untouched flower. Is that what you're saying? Just flower, some buds off of a plant.
Exactly. Buds, or even, I think you can also benefit from the leaves. They have omegas. But yeah, just raw buds. What can you do, or how could you prepare something with raw buds?
We rarely do anything with the raw buds because, our clientele is
Because you're
looking.
cooking. Okay,
Exactly. I
that's fine.
have done smoothies with the raw buds. I write a lot for the different cannabis magazines. So I've done raw stories for a number of them. You know, there is a rather strong taste,
Right.
and that does need to be covered up. When we do a smoothie that is using raw cannabis, we will really make the fruit pop. A lot of fruit, a little cannabis. I know, like, there are people who come to us when we're doing events and say, I don't want to get high, I want the THCA.
Mm.
And we have, for people, done special orders of cannabis that has not been activated Now that's something I can't do through my business. That's only something I can do as a private person. And I can't charge, there are a lot of rules in this.
Sure, of course.
In this business. But for people who are not interested in getting high, they still want the benefits that the THC has to offer. So we do find interest in that. But for us, and because we are cooking, we are always activating, decarboxylating the THCA and the CBDA.
And how do we do that?
So there are a few ways. Actually, there is now a machine called a Nova that decarbs your weed. It doesn't work for us because we're working with 20 pounds of cannabis at a time, which is crazy.
Right.
The first time we got a delivery of 30 pounds of cannabis, we just piled it up on the table and took pictures of it because we just couldn't believe our eyes. It was like a dream come true. But what you need to do in order to take the THCA to the THC is heat the cannabis, heat the flower or the trim, and at a very low temperature. So we do 240 degrees for 45 minutes on a baking sheet, single layer. And we know that time and temperature does convert all of the THCA to THC. We could convert some of it. We've talked about that. Like, should we do a cookie for our company that only half of the cannabis is activated, and it would be a different audience? But we haven't, and the demand is for THC on the THC side of our business. So on the CBD side, we are looking for the littlest bit of THC. And on the THC side, we want to get the most THC out of our flower.
So when you receive it, especially when you receive it in that bulk, but let's think about the lay person who doesn't get the 20 pounds.
Yeah, like an ounce or half an ounce.
Yeah.
Or something.
When you receive that, have all of the stems and everything been pulled from it? Is it just purely bud, or do you have to take something out, or do you just put it all in? Like, what normally would somebody receive, and do you need to do anything before you lay it out on the sheet?
I don't think you need to remove anything. There's going to be properties in everything, the leaves, the stems. I personally don't think anything should be discarded. There's nothing in it that you wouldn't want. There are certainly, and so in a perfect world, we would get buds, we would get gorgeous, perfect konas, and we would make our infusions with that. But that's not going to happen financially. That's, quite prohibitive. So what we generally use are bee buds, which are smaller buds or popcorn buds. They're not what farms want to sell, by the gram. So we aren't using the most potent. The most potent part of the flower is in the buds. So we will use the closest we can get, the most potent we can get. Mm-hmm. We decarboxylate that. So at home, decarboxylate that and then put it into a fat. THC needs a fat to hold on to. So we infuse into coconut oil, and our coconut oil is very concentrated. And then our coconut oil goes into butter for our baked goods. And we did make some bars that were gluten-free, vegan, and they were all coconut oil. And now we're working on a couple of new things that will be just coconut oil and be better for, be vegan. But our coconut oil is so strong that a teaspoon would make, 50 people high. So, it's just crazy intense.
So obviously we're not doing that at home.
No. So what we're doing at home, let's say we have 7 grams of cannabis that we bought at a dispensary or we grow. Take a little, like a hit of it off in a pipe or something, see how potent you think it is. And then what we recommend is 7 grams in a pound of butter.
Okay.
Or 16 ounces of coconut oil. And we infuse into that low temperature. People want an exact number, and we've kind of like around 185 seems to be a good temperature, but you do not need to have a thermometer. A gentle simmer or just occasional bubbles in the oil when you're cooking it. In 3 hours, you will have used all of the cannabinoids and terpenes. It will be infused into the oil or butter.
So you've decarbed, then you get your oil or butter, then you heat it up, and you set it around bubbly.
Yes, light bubbles. Like the gentlest simmer. Like not even, like
simmer.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And then what you end up with, then you have to strain it.
Strain it well. I would say use a mesh strainer and a little bit of cheesecloth, just so you don't get any of the stuff you don't want. Strain it into, you can strain it into a bowl, which then let cool and put in the refrigerator, and it will have water in it. As you strain it, you will still have water, right? Because you're straining it into a bowl and everything is coming out. You're pressing out the wet weed, the oily weed. What you do is put it in the refrigerator, the butter becomes solid.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And then you run your knife around the solid butter, lift it out, and there's all the water, which people say, drink it for tea. Don't drink it. It tastes nasty. There's really nothing in it. It's just dreadful. We've tried it with honey and agave and sugar and brown sugar. It's a pretty dreadful drink. But then if you're doing this at home and you have a pound now of canna butter, what you want to do is take the tiniest bit and put it on, like taste it on a piece of toast, or take a half a teaspoon, mix it with a little peanut butter and eat it, and see how it feels to you. Get act as if that's your edible, and just wait. If you don't feel anything, you can have a little more, and just keep increasing until you find the right potency, rather than cutting a big chunk out of it, making brownies and find that they're way too potent.
Got it. All right, so we've got our butter or our coconut oil that's been infused, and you start in your book with more savory things, which I love, because we're always talking about the brownie or the cookie or the sweets, but you start off with deviled eggs.
Yeah.
And
they're delicious.
Popcorn, cheesy sausage, stuffed mushrooms, beef sliders, mini grilled cheese bites. Like it's like a whole new way of thinking.
Yeah. It's not just the brownie.
It's not just the brownie. So, let's start with deviled eggs, for example. How do you take the butter or the coconut oil to make deviled eggs? Because typically butter or coconut oil are not in a deviled eggs recipe.
Right. So what I do is I add the canna butter, and it's in this particular recipe, it's just a tablespoon. So it's a very small amount of canna butter, and I mix it into the mayonnaise, and then I add the spices to the mayonnaise, and then stuff the egg. It's a very little bit of canna butter. You don't have any taste of cannabis, and so it's an easy way to do it. Another way to do it is if you wanted to have minced onion in your deviled eggs, you could saute them a tiny bit and then add that to the recipe. So really, there's a workaround for most recipes, and you can find a way to infuse if you just think about how the different elements get cooked, and incorporate the canna butter in that step of the cooking process. Another thing that I've done, and this is another deviled egg recipe that a friend of mine who's a chef in Portland makes. He makes the egg filling, he dips it in infused butter. Well, he dips it in not infused butter. I dip it in infused butter.
Okay, he dips it in butter, melted butter.
And then he dips it in brioche crumbs, and then he griddles them. So I've dipped them in infused butter, brioche crumbs, and griddled them. And that is just a magnificent deviled egg.
Wow. So I could probably do that in gluten-free breadcrumbs after dipping them. Wow. That sounds amazing. All right. So really quickly though, I forgot to ask, as we're decarbing, how smelly is it?
Yeah. So it's smelly.
Okay.
It's definitely smelly. So there are a couple of machines that will make your oil for you. Magical Butter Machine, Levo, they do a great job. And for a home cook, again, we can't do it. We'd be, doing it like 24/7 because it only makes a little bit. But for a home person, it's great. You do end up straining it, but other than that, you put everything in the machine, turn it on, and it does it. And it's cool because they light up and they're sort of psychedelic, and they do a beautiful job. So,
that for the individual in your own home kitchen could be a way to less messy, less smell, a little bit more manageable, smaller amounts.
Right. Also, there are a couple of other things. You can decarb into a turkey bag in your oven. So you put your cannabis on a sheet and put a turkey bag over it, seal it, and you can put it in the oven then, and there's very little smell. Another thing that we do is we do it in a Dutch oven, and we put it in the oven with a cover on it. So that also helps minimize the smell.
Okay.
And then keep the windows closed.
Okay. Okay. All right. So another, popcorn. Popcorn seems like it'd be super easy. Explain how we infuse our popcorn.
It's funny because I've just been doing popcorn a different way. So I have to look at, so what I've been doing, and I have to see, so with popcorn, there are a couple of ways to go. You can melt canna butter or canna oil and mix. The chances are it's not going to be enough to work with the amount of popcorn that you're making. So what you need to do is add your infused butter to non-infused butter so that you have enough.
A lot more butter.
Exactly.
To spread across all of your
the popcorn.
Okay.
Yeah. Or you can make a little spice mix where you're adding the decarbed cannabis to Parmesan and oregano and toss that with the already not infused buttered popcorn. So you're actually using decarboxylated cannabis essentially as a spice.
Okay.
So that's another way to do it.
Okay. And then quesadillas, it's starting to make a little more sense now, but how are we infusing our quesadillas?
Well, so there are really two ways that I infuse quesadillas. I am almost always having vegetables within my quesadilla. So I will saute, if I'm making, let's say, I'm making 2 sandwich quesadillas. So 4 tortillas.
Tortillas, okay.
Yeah. I would either brush the tortilla with the melted infused butter, or I would saute the vegetables in infused butter, or I would saute the entire quesadilla. I would put infused butter or oil in the pan and cook it that way.
And then cook it.
Yeah.
See, it's starting to make sense now. It's all coming together, and this is definitely a lot easier than I thought it would be.
It's easy. If you can cook and you know how to use butter or oil, you got it.
Well, I was just making an egg today, and I'll usually do a little bit of a light olive oil spray, but then I always want to put butter in there too.
Yeah, yeah. And you
Just
can
to,
also infuse olive oil. You can
oh,
infuse
right.
any oil. I've infused sesame
Okay.
oil. I've infused bacon fat.
Oh,
Any,
speaking of bacon, charred
yeah.
Brussels sprouts with bacon jam. How is the infusion happening there?
Well, I infuse the bacon jam. It's a lot of onions, whatever's it's again a sautéing in the infused, whatever fat you're using. So in this situation, I saved bacon fat for a month. I was working on a story for a magazine, so I obviously purposefully made a lot of bacon over that time period. I always test recipes 3 times, but I had collected quite a bit of bacon fat, and I infused that very slow. I put the bacon fat in an oven-proof little ramekin with the cannabis, and I infused it, and it was amazing. And it only needed a tiny bit. I made incredible grilled cheese sandwiches, that had the bacon. It was, yeah. One
So
thing
wait, you actually made the grilled cheese using the bacon fat
yeah,
in the
yeah,
skillet.
yes, yes. It was beautiful.
So then
I
you could do that with
suggest
eggs. Yeah.
strain it because they're always little pieces if
Bits.
you want. I didn't mind the little bits.
Okay.
It kind of studded the crust of the sandwich with a little, it was great. One thing I recommend to people that's an easy way to get infused food to you and other people, but not worry if don't everybody can eat everything. A Caesar salad. I make a Caesar salad not infused. Then I infuse croutons. So I make croutons. I always make a lot of them. I always have them in my house in a jar. Just saute 25 croutons in infused any kind of oil, and they last and last. And if you're serving a Caesar salad, then now you would have to do it with a gluten-free bread, but
Free bread, and then
there's
make the
certainly
crouton out of
plenty.
that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then if you're having a dinner party and some people want to be high, they get, we can say to them, well, 5 croutons is going to be 10 milligrams. So, and so I tend to have spices, croutons. I keep a lot of things in the house. I have an infused caramel sauce. I have an infused chocolate sauce. I have
All labeled correctly,
yes,
right?
and that's another thing. I'm so glad you mentioned that
Because
because oh God, there's been times I will make something, forget to label it, but I'm like, oh, I forgot. Oh, well, I'll remember when and no. Label everything. What some of my friends do, if they have young kids, they'll freeze something and put it in the freezer, and it says liver, or bone broth or
Oh,
something.
wait, let me tell you, I should have
Yeah.
brought it in. I didn't bring it in, but there is a locked box that works amazingly well in the fridge and the freezer. It's called the Hush box. It's a very, very heavy plastic, and it has a little lock and key.
Great.
And that's how I've kept edibles in the freezer without any problem at all. And
that's great.
all the other lock boxes are kind of weird to put into the fridge or freezer.
Right.
And something like this, it actually does lock. It's an extremely heavy, durable plastic.
Wow, that's great. Never heard of. I just finished working on a cannabis lifestyle book. So it has everything. There's a cannabis product for every body part now, really every body part. So I called in a lot of things to try them out, and I didn't know about that. And and we have a section on how to, keep the edibles from the kids. That's a great thing. And I'm going to look into it and see if it's something I can include.
Yeah, it's originalhushbox.com. Yeah, original Hushbox. I'll send you the link.
Okay.
So we were just talking about the savories, but you do have sweets in the cookbook. I'm holding it up again so everybody can see it. You've got brownies and cookies and magical almond cookies, breakfast cookies. gluten-free and vegan things, which is really helpful. And then you move into cakes as well. So we were talking about smell, and you mentioned taste. Can you taste the cannabis? And for those who maybe don't want that, how do you mask the taste? Is it more prominent in one kind of food than the other? Because particularly people who are just used to sweets and don't want the cannabis taste in a cookie or a cake, how do you deal with the taste aspect?
That's a huge part of what we deal with in our edibles company. First of all, some people want the taste.
Right.
Some people love the taste. For people, it's like psychologically, I think, helpful. Like, oh, I taste it. This is going to work. They're kind of already receptive and they taste it. They're like, this is going to be good. Other people, like myself, really don't like the taste of cannabis in my bake.
I'm sort of iffy about it. I've gotten a little bit used to it, but I really appreciate something that doesn't have a strong taste, where I just feel like it, maybe I have a hint of it. I don't mind the hint of it.
And certain combinations, like white chocolate with a hint of cannabis, is a delicious combination. I think that's one of the things that are enhanced by a hint of cannabis. But mostly in our company, we're trying to get rid of the cannabis taste completely. There is a challenge in Oregon, and I don't know if this is the case in other places. Dispensaries are looking for the most potent edible at the lowest price. It's sad, but true. I think it's less true in California. People seem to be more into microdosing. Right. But in Oregon, they want, and our high is 50 milligrams. So we just did, I'll show you because it's super cute. We have a new product out called Fudge Yourself. So it's a 50 milligram piece of fudge. It comes in a little piece of foil. In Oregon and everywhere, you have to show how you cut it up to be the right number of serving sizes. So because it's a 50 and 5 milligrams of THC is the dose, we show how you can break it up.
Very cool.
But this, because we don't use distillate, so let me just quickly say, so how we infuse our products is just into coconut oil or butter. We don't use any kind of concentrate. There are a lot of things out there that are far more potent. If you buy distillate, it could be 70% THC. It doesn't really have anything else in it. It doesn't have all the other benefits, but it will definitely get you high. A different high than infusion with butter or oil, but it gets you high. For us, the challenge is putting 50 milligrams of coconut oil or butter is more of a challenge than distillate because you need a lot less distillate. It's much more potent.
Okay.
Yeah. So when we were working on the fudge, we have 4 flavors. It's changing we're adding flavors all the time. We really had to ramp up the spices and the flavors that were in there to mask the taste. The first time I tasted one of the fudges, I did a recipe, gave it to the kitchen. I was like, this is absolutely the most dreadful thing I've ever put in my mouth. And the kitchen is like, oh, but I'm very strict about not wanting any taste. And there have been times I've had to say, okay, there's gonna be a little bit of a taste in this because the flavor is not going to mask the taste.
Got it.
But it's just a fact that it's the only way we can do it without using BHO, CO2, isolate,
the concentrates
distillate.
and the isolates.
Exactly. We just don't want to do that. But so it's a question of masking the taste with savory things, more garlic, stronger spices, With baked goods, almond extract. You know, there's just, yeah.
Almond extract. Okay, so that was my next question, is what particular spices are really good with masking? Garlic and almond. But what else? What else is really good that you would add in?
Basil. If we're doing a savory, if we're doing a pesto, phenomenal. So we'll do salads with like a pesto vinaigrette, so that there's a teaspoon in there, you know, just flavor, things full of flavor, and you won't have the cannabis taste. You may notice kind of an earthiness.
Okay, yeah.
It won't be like if you're eating a stuffed mushroom that's infused and it has an earthiness, you don't know whether it's the mushroom or the cannabis. And it's like they're kind of working together. But that is a challenge. Like you know, if you just make a sugar cookie and you put just cannabis oil, you know, like butter in it, you're going to taste it. So you may want to change that sugar cookie to a almond cookie, you know, or an almond chocolate chip cookie, something that's going to take away from that cannabis.
Got it. Just really quickly, for those of you who are here, if you do have a question, you can type it in the chat box or the Q&A button. If you're on the web version, I think you can also do this on the telephone version of Zoom, but you have to be in Zoom for us to be able to see your questions. Just reminding everybody, we've got a couple of minutes left. This sounds like it would be super simple, but I can't figure out how you would put oil or butter. This is always like this little puzzle. Yeah. Cantaloupe lime popsicles. Usually you don't put butter or coconut oil. So how do we do this?
We do the popsicles with coconut oil.
Oh, okay.
And we blend. So the problem with things that don't have a fat is emulsification.
Yeah.
So what we do with things that we can add a little bit of soy lecithin, which is an emulsifier. So if you add lecithin or just a couple of spins in a blender, and then you pour it into the molds, it will suspend the cannabis throughout the pop.
Got it. Okay, mystery solved.
Yeah.
So Helen, I see that you have a question. You raised your hand. I always forget that there's this feature on Zoom where they can have this little virtual hand raised.
Oh, cute. I didn't know.
But if you could type your question, that would be great. If you can't, if I don't see your question in a few minutes, I'm going to come back to you and I'll put your voice on so you can ask the question. Let's see, we do have some typed ones. Terry Roberts is asking, is there anything I can use instead of oils? So I guess that instead of butter or oil. Now you did mention that THC in particular needs fat.
Yes.
But
like what? Could this person say what it is that they would like to make? What category of?
Of category food. Okay, so Terry, if you could type in, I'm going to go to a next question really quick, but if you could type in what you would like to make or why you don't want any oils at all. Because again, when you're cooking with cannabis, or you're trying to cut oil out.
Just trying to use like
So what would you like to make? Would you like to make a sweets? Are you baking something, or would you like to make something savory? It's a little bit tough, I would think, that if you really want to cut out oils, that you need oils and fats. You need fat for the THC to best absorb.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I don't think it was for this cookbook, but for another cookbook that I did, we used the decarbed cannabis and made it into flour, essentially. We put it in a Cuisinart.
Oh, like baking flour.
Exactly. So we pulverize in a blender or in a food processor. And I remember that it was a zucchini cake, and I substituted a quarter of the flour with cannabis flour.
With decarbed cannabis flour.
Yeah.
FLOWER, which has then been
turned into FLOUR.
FLOUR,
Yeah.
flower. That, well, there you go, Terry. I think that answers your question, and that is quite interesting. So then you could do that, but then you could, in a sense, use it a little bit with your spice mix. You
Yes.
could also sprinkle it on things,
Yes.
couldn't you?
Yes.
So you could be in a salad dressing.
Right.
It would thicken it a little, maybe, would it? Or would
No,
it
well,
act
I
more
don't
like a
know, 'cause
spice? It would
yes,
act
it's
more like
more like a
basil
spice.
or oregano.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, you do have
Yeah.
to decarb it first. Let's see,
Yeah.
Michelle says, are there any terpene combinations that are your favorite in dark chocolate?
Oh,
And do you enhance any products with isolated terpenes?
we do not add terpenes. I think that you see people adding terpenes when their way of infusing is removing terpenes and cannabinoids. So we are preserving most of the terpenes. So we don't need to do that. However, companies that use distillate will add botanical terpenes.
Okay.
So that, I'm not particularly a fan of that, but I get it. I want the plant to have as much as it has to offer and as pure as possible.
So here is a good reason to figure out the workaround for this. If you're in a non-legal state and all you can get is hemp, and we're talking industrial hemp derived, so if we could get the plant, flower, etc., then that might be a time to use terpenes if you would like. I mean,
yes. I mean, not all hemp has CBD. So, if you are looking for, and be very careful. I think people should be careful where they're getting their industrial hemp.
Yeah.
If you don't, a lot of it comes from other countries, and when it's tested, it's
got nothing.
it's got a lot of
bad
crap
things
in it. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that I don't think I recommend using industrial hemp. I think
so if somebody has a hemp farm and we know that it's being processed organically, it's clean, that they test it, because a lot of these states where hemp is legal and hemp is being grown and tested, or she happens to be living with a farmer.
Right. If you know the source.
Right. So if you know the source and you get good hemp flower and good hemp parts of the plant, then you should just be able to work with it in the same way that you're working with cannabis flower, correct?
Yes.
Decarb
And
it.
in that situation, you could add terpenes.
Okay.
Yeah. As long as you know that it's grown properly. And with that,
so,
go ahead.
Helen just dropped off. I was just gonna say I was gonna allow Helen to talk and ask her question because she had raised her hand. She must have not been on the platform where she could type.
Oh, okay.
So we have a few more questions. We're a little bit over the hour, but it's casual here, and my family is still out at the moment, so we don't have a 2-year-old running around. So do you use or make alcohol-based tinctures? Linda's asking that.
I have made both alcohol and vegetable glycerin tinctures. It's not something we do in our business. Like we leave the tinctures to other people. I don't like alcohol tinctures just because I have yet to, exactly. I don't like alcohol. It's just, I don't like that feeling. Though I know a lot of people who use tinctures for, everything, for sleep, for, all kinds of things. It's definitely a good product. I prefer to do it in vegetable glycerin. It has a natural sweetness, but we don't make it like for our business, but it's not hard to make. Yeah. I have I think that there was a time when I was working on soups for a cannabis magazine, and I did, after cooking, add, I'm trying to think what I did. I think I added a alcohol tincture to a chimichurri sauce,
Hmm.
and then we spooned that on top of uh, a couple of different soups.
Okay. Okay, but again, reminder that it's the fat in the butter and the oil
Yeah,
that helps the THC get absorbed.
yeah,
So here's another question. Does the cooking temperature matter for baked goods? I've read that baking can degrade and waste the cannabinoids. For
yes.
example, what temperature would you bake brownies or cookies at?
We never bake higher than 340.
Oh,
Everything
okay.
we make for the business has to be tested. So
Mhm.
we get in the flour. If it's not tested, we have to test it ourselves. Then we make oil, and that has to be tested. And then we make the baked goods, and that has to be tested. We have found that at 340, we are able to preserve most of the cannabinoids and terpenes.
Oh,
The most important ones are preserved, which is not the case, if you bake it. So something like pizza, if you want to make pizza and you want to do it right and want to do it in a 450-degree oven, what we suggest is you make the crust, you get it where you want, and you add the cannabis after, whether it's in a drizzle of like a wonderful olive oil an infused olive oil that has all kinds of herbs and spices, or you can
mm,
put it, sometimes I'll make a pizza and I'll have a salad on top with Parmesan, and it'll be tossed with an infused vinaigrette. But if you something like a cream puff, make the cream puff at 450, infuse the custard. Just
okay.
because you will degrade the, a lot of the benefits.
But the cake, you could make a cake at 340 then? Because
Yeah, I
normally you
have,
would make it at 350, right? So
yeah,
does it just
fine.
mean cook it longer?
Test it. And yeah, you may cook it probably just a little bit longer,
Okay.
but you really don't want to go over 340. And I haven't had any problem with, something that's supposed to be baked at 375. It's fine at 340.
Okay. Okay. Well, we are a little bit after the hour. This has been so much fun
It
and
has.
interesting. This is the book, the new book, although you want to look at Laurie Wolf's other books as well. This one's Edibles for Beginners, a cannabis cookbook. And again, it has not just sweets, it has savory items as well. It's got the cookies, brownies, and different kinds of bars that you might expect and I saw the rice treats in there too.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, and
But
one
then,
thing I
yeah.
wanted to, our company makes one savory product, and it's these little cheese crisps.
Oh, nice.
And it's I say it tastes like a Cheez-It and a shortbread cookie had a baby. So it's very rich, and they're only like 2.5 milligrams each. You get 17 in a container. So this is a wonderful way. It's only in Oregon for people to start, because you can eat one and be fine. We also crumble them up on macaroni and cheese, and
Ooh,
also,
yeah.
yeah. So you can make an edible that then you can use, for a lot of different things. So, kind of think large. And if you're going to make butter, know that you can make things that you just keep on hand. Also, infused butter lasts a long time. You could keep it you could freeze it forever, or it stays in the refrigerator for a good amount of time. So it's good.
Oh,
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
croutons. You
Yeah.
were talking about croutons before, sauteing them in a butter to infuse them. And then you said you could store them. How do you store those?
I keep them in an airtight container just on my kitchen counter.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. And
Yeah.
then around how long do they last?
6 weeks, 8 weeks. They're
Okay.
crisp and dry, and so yeah, they're
Okay.
quite long lasting.
Okay. That sounds good. Wow. There's so many little tips that were really helpful. Thank
Good.
you.
I want to tell you, we had an Elementa meeting, like gathering at our
Yeah.
kitchen. It was phenomenal.
Oh, thank you.
There were so
glad.
many women, people cried, people laughed. I shared things that I hadn't really felt comfortable sharing. It was quite a wonderful opportunity. So I thank you. I think you're doing something tremendous.
Well, thank you so much. I think there is always a need. People say, well, why just women? We're actually going to have a few co-ed events coming up this year, particularly in February when we're talking about sexual wellness.
Yeah.
That I think that it changes the dynamic, but having just women in a room talking, sharing, exchanging knowledge, there's an energy there that is unlike any other cannabis event I've ever been at.
Yeah, I agree with you. It was kind of mind-blowing because I'd never really been part of that kind of experience, and it was very powerful.
Well, thank you for hosting. We might want to do it again then
We
sometime.
would love to. We would love to.
That sounds great. Well, everyone who was here live with us on Zoom and asked some of your questions, thank you so much. Those of you watching live on Facebook, if you had posted any questions on our Facebook page, I will send them to Laurie.
Yeah, please reach out anytime. I love getting questions.
It's Laurie and Mary Jane, Laurie, and maryjane.com.
Yep. And Mary is my daughter-in-law. She's my business partner and daughter-in-law. So it's
all in the family.
All in the family. Yep.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, Laurie, very much. And I mentioned earlier, I'm going to mention again that on February 5th, 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern time, that is on a Wednesday evening, we're going to have a watch party with Marisa Sturch. She's the host of The Healing Powers. We're talking about cannabis and seniors. We're going to all together, it's a watch party, meaning we're going to watch the episode, which is about 7 minutes long, of The Healing Powers Cannabis and Seniors episode.
Right.
You'll also be able to watch it later on Gaia TV if you happen to stream Gaia TV. But then we're going to talk to Marisa, and it's going to be a conversation like this. I hope that you can tune in as well.
Yeah, I want to see that.
And excellent. Well, thank you again. Thanks everybody. And this has been the Ellementa Book Club. Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.